I'm Glenn Sands. I'm the editor of LARA magazine at HMG Aerospace. And today I'm talking to aircraft leasing and recycling specialist, AerFin, on if the industry has really suffered after COVID, their plans for the future, and just what they've got planned for the next years ahead, looking at the narrow body market and also their engine components. Okay, so the change in inventory, Mark, you said there's not been too much of a change. You've always gone after the narrow bodies and stuff. So can you describe that sort of thinking?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, we haven't had a change in strategy as such. AerFin have been providing end-of-life solutions on narrow body platforms since 2015. Of the 70 aircraft acquired to date, close to 50% have been either A320 or 737NG family aircraft types. One of our other core platforms, as you well may know, is the Embraer E-Jets. We entered into the E-Jet platform as there was a less mature aftermarket in comparison to the legacy narrow-body market, with fewer players, providing us with the opportunity to carve out a niche on this platform.
What are the main components that are being sought after, Mark, within the narrow-body market?
Yeah, I mean, especially throughout the pandemic, the scheduled components, the calendar-driven components have seen a demand as of course it's calendar-based. A lot of avionics as aircraft are fired back up into operation. So yeah, but now we're seeing a comprehensive spread of component requirement as the operators ramp up their utilization.
Demographically, are you seeing a particular increase in one area in the world than another at the moment, given that the restrictions are gradually sort of easing in one country, still in place in another? And how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, North America's been a strong market for us. It's probably been our strongest region throughout the period, but Europe's seen a great recovery, and yeah, we're seeing worldwide recovery moving forward.
So there's green shoots of recovery, like you say.
Yeah, it's looking very positive. Maximo, maybe you could elaborate on some of the production and fleet trend of the legacy narrow-body aircraft.
Yeah, so being our core platforms, we've been tracking very closely the 320ceo family and the 737NG throughout the pandemic. They are, of course, the largest aircraft families, commercial aircraft families in the world. And going into the pandemic, there were between 12,500 and 13,000 aircraft in service worldwide. And that in-service figure has not really contracted as much as one would have expected, maybe. It was about 6 to 8% really between the two families. We've also tracked what's become of those aircraft a lot. So there've been around 500 secondary market placements of 320ceo and NGs. This is just from these are passenger configured ones.
Can I just touch on the cargo? Because there's a bit of a shift, like passengers are, the elder passengers. So how do you find the cargo market? Because I've heard that, there's going to be so many thousand needed over the next sort of 10 years, and everyone's shifting to online ordering, which obviously brings air cargo, to the fore. So what's your views on that?
From AerFin's standpoint, it's a fairly new segment. We don't have a lot of history with the cargo market, but when you look at the profile of cargo operators, they're usually quite well aligned with the sort of services we can offer. They're usually more likely to be large users of USM, both on the airframe components and on the engine side, given the age of the aircraft and the typical utilization profile. Now, in the case of e-commerce, it might be a little bit higher than historically, but we're still talking lower than full-scale passenger operation. So we see a lot of opportunity there. And again, they would be aligned with the sort of inventory we have, as we're very well embedded with the NG and the 320ceo platforms.
Excellent. Going back to like the basics now, let's talk about the tearing down process of an aircraft, once you've acquired it. And can you just talk through the process?
So once purchase conditions have been successfully negotiated, AerFin would make the selection of a teardown facility, taking into consideration of any geographical limitations that the particular acquisition may present. If it was acquired in the US, for example, it's not an issue. We have a wide variety of trusted teardown partners in the US, but we may elect to ferry flight the aircraft to a more local UK or European based teardown facility, subject to availability and subject to our desire to reduce the turnaround time of the parts.
So how long does that process take? I mean, obviously it depends on the size of the aircraft, but what's the sort of turnaround time from something arriving on the tarmac to being in bits on the shelf, ready to go?
Yeah, it varies. It varies on availability at teardown facilities. It just depends on capacity, of course. Throughout the pandemic, we've had a few teardowns where the process was a little bit more elongated than initially forecast. Again, skilled staff shortages were a contributing factor to that. But typically, from when the teardown starts to completion, it can be anything from 4 to 8 weeks, dependent on the aircraft type itself. We will then, dependent on the location of the teardown facility, you can add 2 weeks to 6 weeks for having the bulk of the material returned back to our facilities.
It's not long, is it, at all?
No, it can be a quick turnaround time, but it does generally vary dependent on the location, the aircraft, and due diligence.
Yeah. Can you just talk through how a request would come in from an airline and how it would be processed?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our airframe HQ is in London Gatwick. We have personnel manned 24/7 on site. So throughout the pandemic, we've had, regardless of remote working of various individuals, we had the AOG team, the AOG sales, the AOG contracts, the AOG stores and logistics teams on site. So if a component demand comes from an operator anywhere in the world, we'll have the component demand come in. Our AOG sales and contract support individuals will process and typically have the component ready to collect within 1 to 2 hours.
So that part would be at Gatwick, or would it be?
Yeah, so all our serviceable components from an airframe perspective, we hold at Gatwick. Whilst it's not a modest size facility, our Cardiff facility is over 100,000 square foot. So we draw on that inventory when we feel our inventory levels are running low in Gatwick. But yeah, through advanced inventory optimization, we will have the serviceable components ready on the shelf, and we will speculate in advance, subject to our pipeline of operator customers, what composition of serviceable inventory to hold on the shelf.
What makes AerFin better than the rest out there?
I think one of the key points is what Mark touched upon earlier. It's generally the young inventory that we've acquired, or the young aircraft we managed to acquire throughout AerFin's history. I'd say, of course, we're not the only player in the space, but I'd say our acquisition history is fairly unique in how we played in spaces where our competitors have not. Prior to me joining, there was, of course, a lot of work with the A340, which was some considered quite a marginalized type, but for AerFin's perspective, it turned out to be a nice little cash cow for a few years. And that was also down to timing. AerFin saw a window of opportunity to get in before the mass phase outs were really taking place. And as luck would have it, we were out before COVID struck, so that was good timing. The E-Jet, though, was another example. The E-Jet, so we acquired the Saudia fleet of 15 170s back in 2016. And again, it was as Mark said, it was a relatively immature market. And maybe that would have not been a fleet that many of our competitors would have chosen to go for. But it's served us very well. And from that, we've been able to develop airframe PBH services to compete with the OEM. So it's I think the sophistication with AerFin is how we study a product type and how we think not only how we can serve that specific market, but any adjacent markets as well. If it's got engines common with another type, or if it's got other airframe components that are common. So we really maximize the full value potential in, I would say, quite a unique way of everything we acquire.
Brilliant. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. That's excellent. You sort of covered everything that I'd asked for. And we got there in the end. Thanks very much, Mark.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.